As part of your proxy statement filed with the SEC, you will disclose a few things about your company's independent auditor, including having a proposal to ratify their appointment. Today on Zippy Point. I'm Brock Romanek, and I'm a big fan of yous. So I have a separate Vid-Guide about why ratification of the independent auditor is on the ballot of every company, even though that's not required by the regulators, a link of which is beneath this video. It's a brief video, and it mainly has to do with reaching a quorum. Curiously enough, companies often don't disclose that's the reason why ratification is on the ballot. They typically say they care about what shareholders think and that ratification is a good governance practice. But the duty to hire and fire the independent auditor is the job of the company's audit committee, not management's job, not the shareholders' responsibility. So what to disclose? So when a company voluntarily submits a matter to shareholders for a vote, like auditor ratification, Item 18 of Schedule 14A requires a description of 3 items. 1, nature of the matter. 2, reasons for submitting it to a shareholder vote. And 3, what action the company intends to take in the event of a negative vote by shareholders. So in the auditor ratification context, the first item, nature of the matter, since this is just a ratification, not approval, you'll disclose this is an advisory, non-binding vote. The second, the reasons. Like I just said, companies typically disclose that they care about what shareholders think and that ratification is a good governance practice. I haven't seen anyone mention that. They're putting it on the ballot as a way to reach quorum. The third, consequences of a negative vote. Most companies disclose that if shareholders don't ratify the auditor's appointment, the audit committee will consider that fact in determining whether to select new auditors in the current year or in the future. Some companies even disclose that even if the selection is ratified by shareholders, that this audit firm is ratified, the audit committee still has the discretion to switch auditors over the course of the year if that's in the company's best interest. A few other required proxy disclosures you'll be making related to auditor ratification. You'll need to disclose whether the independent auditor will attend the annual shareholders meeting. Under Item 9C of Schedule 14A, you're required to disclose 2 things. This disclosure typically is in the ratification proposal section, whether representatives of the independent auditor will be present at the annual meeting and whether those representatives will have the opportunity to make a statement or be available to answer questions. You don't have to name names. You don't want to name names about which representatives will be there. And of course, you want to confirm and make plans for your auditor to be there. It's a real pain if the representative doesn't show up. This does happen on occasion. There's no real consequences since it's unlikely anyone will notice or care except you. It'll be stressful for you if they told you they were coming and then they don't. And if you forgot to tell them to come, that's definitely on you. So you'll have to also disclose the voting standard that applies to auditor ratification. Sometimes this will be disclosed briefly at the end of the auditor ratification proposal section, majority vote. But sometimes it's just where the more fulsome disclosure about the voting standards of all the matters on the ballots are in the voting standards section. The voting standard for the voting standard that applies for you for auditor ratification will depend on the laws of the state in which your company is incorporated, as well as what's in your charter and bylaws. If the standard is an affirmative vote of the majority of votes cast, in person or by proxy, abstentions and broker non-votes will have no effect on the outcome. If your standard is a majority of the shares present and entitled to vote on the subject matter, abstentions are counted as present and entitled and thus are the equivalent of votes against the proposal. But you don't have to worry. It's very rare that a auditor ratification gets even under 90% of the vote. It's typically in the mid to high 90s. You also need to disclose the name of your independent auditor or any predecessor in the proxy. Under Item 9A of Schedule 14A, companies are required to include the name of their independent auditor selected for the year. That's going to be in the proxy a couple of times. And under Item 9B of Schedule 14A, if the auditor has changed since the beginning of the last fiscal year, you're going to identify your predecessor auditor. As noted in my separate Vid-Guide under Item 9D of Schedule 14A, you'll need to include some change in auditor disclosure required by Item 304A of Regulation SK if the company's auditor has resigned or been dismissed within the last 2 fiscal years or any subsequent interim period. So look for that Vid-Guide. So these required disclosures are sometimes included in the auditor ratification section, even though they're not required to be there. The audit fee table and disclosure about pre-approval of non-audit services. So sometimes those are bundled in, and sometimes they're just outside, perhaps combined with the audit committee report. So see my separate Vid-Guides about how all those different things are drafted. So those are all of your required disclosures about your independent auditor. But there's some voluntary ones that you might make too. A description of the annual auditor evaluation process, perhaps disclosure about the benefits of long tenure for your auditor. There's been a low simmering debate over the past decade about rotation of audit firms. Some auditors have been with their company as a client for decades and decades. What sort of independence controls the company and the auditor have to ensure that there's independence between the company and the auditor, that the independent auditor doesn't have any financial interest in the company. And of course, that the board recommends a vote in favor of ratification. This might be stated more than once in the ratification section. So I've seen disclosures as short as a couple of paragraphs in the ratification proposal, and then some that are a couple of pages, similar to what I've just showed you. This was from Coca-Cola's 2020 proxy. Where in the proxy does the ratification proposal belong? There's no required spot for this. You really do have the flexibility to order your management proposals as you see fit. And this one truly does move all over the place. I've seen it as the second proposal right after director elections a lot. And I've also seen it as the last of management proposals. So it'll be right there above shareholder proposals. So it really varies, usually in the second slide or the last slide. I don't see it as a first or anywhere in between, but they're probably out there, I'm sure. Thank you.